Joining us today, State Representative Jason Knight, one of four candidates in the Democrat primary for Attorney General here in Rhode Island. Look, this is going to be one of those races that sticks out. I think we're talking a lot about the Providence mayor's race. We're talking a lot about the governor's race. And frankly, the Attorney General's race deserves that same level of attention and really digging down into detail. We're doing that here on Bartholomew Town. We'll have multiple candidate interviews for you over the course of election season. Representative Knight, first of all, welcome to Bartholomew Town. Why run for Attorney General right now?
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate your work. And the reason why I'm running for Attorney General is this: I've always been motivated to serve, and I've been a former prosecutor with that office. I've been a longtime state legislator representing Barrington and Warren at the General Assembly. I am a United States Navy veteran of the submarine service. I was 8 years active duty. It's always kind of been in my DNA. The AG is an open race, right? Peter Nerona can't run again. And I think that I'm the best qualified candidate to run in and pick up from where he is leaving off, grab that baton and run with it, because what I bring is a deep well of experience and a track record for making Rhode Island government work and create results on the ground for the voters. Basically, I've always, in my public service, protected Rhode Islanders, and I want to continue doing the same thing as the next Attorney General.
The other three candidates in this race, Joe Solomon Jr., Borwick, Keith Hoffman from really the Nerona camp, if you will, and Kim Ahern as well, recently Cannabis Control Commissioner. Look, let's get it straight. This is, in my judgment, and I'd like your feedback as well. This seems like a race that can be about substance and about tactic. What sets you apart from those other candidates right out of the gate, all of which are universally credible and viable candidates?
Well, it should absolutely be a race about substance. You'll get no disagreement from me there. And I'm grateful for the other candidates who are running. Look, they're all lawyers. They all come with some level of public service. They all come with their accomplishments as lawyers. But, most they're running on their resumes, whereas I am running on my record. I've been accountable to my voters for a decade. I have, they've had a chance to see me in action. I've made promises. I've kept promises. I've been a straight talker, and they've had a chance to test my judgment and my leadership. And I'm bringing that to the rest of the state. I'm the only candidate in this race who is really set up to do what the AG needs to do. You're not hiring a lawyer to do lawyer's work. You're hiring a lawyer to be a leader and to make sure that the resources of the office are set out appropriately to protect our Rhode Islanders from all the bad guys out there, whether they're on the street corner or in a boardroom or in the White House.
When you look at your experience in the legislature's sculpting policy, you would be moving in the attorney general's office to top cop. You'd be based on enforcement of that policy. How might that inform your perspective as that leader, knowing how the sausage was made and what went into the discussions along the road to things like gun legislation or anything else for that matter?
Well, you know, I think having someone in that top spot. I mean, you got your governor, you have your General Assembly, the treasurer, all of that, the Secretary of State, but the Attorney General occupies a unique place. It is the people's lawyer. It's the Attorney General is there with the people as their client. I think it can only help the serving Attorney General to have a deep understanding of how the other branches of government operate, particularly the General Assembly, home of the budget, home of all these policy decisions that the Attorney General is tasked with enforcing. So I think it only enhances the ability to, it's kind of lawyering 101. The more experience and the more you know about your client you bring to the job, you're going to be a better lawyer and better able to protect them from all the craziness that's out there lurking for Rhode Islanders these days.
I want to get into some of your sort of hallmark issues, certainly gun legislation, but also what I would call balancing criminal or law enforcement with actual justice and things like court fees or burdensome fees that are essentially targeted at people who are experiencing poverty for the most part. Let's get into that in just a second. But before we do, just kind of working into a general synopsis here, what sort of, how would you define your law practice in your personal work? And what else about your background has kind of put you into this moment here that really shapes who you are?
When I went to law school, I had this I had this enormous interest in the law and politics and history, and I they said, "Well, what do you wanna do?" And I said, "Well, I want to put it in service of the public." And so what that meant to me was actually serving, regular people, the voters, and I was interested in a government position, either attorney general as a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, because both of them are in the court dealing with the real issues. It's on the ground public safety stuff. It's super important that we handle that appropriately. So I started as a prosecutor, and I made the transition being a criminal defense lawyer, which I've been for the last 16 years, protecting Rhode Islanders from the government when it acts unconstitutionally or unlawfully. And it doesn't escape me that in this particular time in our nation's history, all the Democratic AGs in the country, including Peter Nerona, are engaged in the process of pushing back on a government that's acting unlawfully or unconstitutionally. So I think that 20 years of every day in the courthouse really gives me a unique perspective amongst the candidates to make me better able to serve Rhode Islanders as the next AG.
Well, with that in mind, taking a look at your work inside the legislative body and especially on guns, that is, I would say, you think in both directions. You think Representative Jason Knight, you think gun legislation. You think gun legislation in Rhode Island, you think Representative Jason Knight. So it'd be difficult for you to not own that as a hallmark of your campaign. So I would imagine that it is. What can you tell us about what you learned about gun legislation and passing gun legislation in Rhode Island that informs how you would approach the Attorney General's office?
Well, it is a hallmark of my campaign because it stands out as an example of doing something really hard that 3 out of 4 Rhode Islanders wanted, but the political process just wasn't prepared to accept. I introduced that bill in 2018, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed to get it over the line, which we finally did last summer. And I think you can uh, look at where I'm coming from with gun legislation through a bunch of prisms. Number one, I'm there to try to do the greatest good for Rhode Islanders, and it is beyond question that most Rhode Islanders want to see the strongest and toughest gun laws possible to shield us from the possibility of gun violence. Even though it's not perfect, you need only look at Brown and tragically Pawtucket just in the last few months. So there's a ton of work to be done there. Um, I think that the other way to think about it is that I'm not afraid of the hard task. I'm not afraid of having the hard conversation and talking to who I need to talk to, even if they don't agree with me about trying to move Rhode Island forward on that particular issue.
Yeah. I think that that is something uh, right now when we look at this discussion. For example, you got these guys running around, the coffee shop guy. I did a thing with him on Lively Experiment, whatever. They're just out there, MAGA pro gun, disguised as, in some cases, moderate Democrats and going door to door selling this idea that the work that you've done in your gun legislation pursuits and the coalition that you were able to construct that required the support of also in the other chamber from the late Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, a lot of specific lanes to open up. There's a lot of people who are trying to undo what you've done right now on the legislative level. And we've seen how dismantling government at the federal level is much easier to do than to restore it. So when you look out at the landscape right now, does that feed an urgency to your message right now when there are people who are actively, literally working against the work that you did? Does that motivate you?
Oh my God. Absolutely. You know, Rhode Islanders are going to have some choices in this election. The League of Businesses are putting up their candidates, and you're right. They're MAGA candidates that, as much as they try to run from the issue, they want constitutional actors in these elected positions, which is just code for um, Second Amendment zealots. Frankly, people who are part of the MAGA movement and deny the legitimate election of Joe Biden. I saw that clip that was out there on social media that you had with Mr. Lebec. I think that what I bring to the race is I want to stand here and stand up to scrutiny to the public to be a candidate who's running for the right reasons, which is to lead the office for the benefit of Rhode Islanders. And yeah, it motivates me because I think that elections have consequences. We can certainly make mistakes in elections. I am I want to make sure that the people have a choice and a good choice in this attorney general's race. And if you're looking for a leader who's a great lawyer, then I'm the guy.
Let's talk about something that's become what I am going to coin right here. And if anybody takes this, please credit Bartholomew Town, because here we go. The Nerona Doctrine, which is assertion. Peter Nerona asserted that the Attorney General's office is an independent, constitutionally elected office. I mean, that's obvious. It's as obvious as the sky is blue during the day, most days. But he asserted it by challenging the executive branch on a regular basis from what some could call an investigative side. When you talk about the ILO contract, that was something that the McKee administration kind of backed into coming out of COVID, an education contract. Ultimately, it was not a violation of ethics, but Attorney General Nerona gave a lengthy presentation as to why he found it to be abutting the edge of an ethics concern. For example, there are many others. Personal disagreements and beefs aside, there's a lot of talk now about establishing an inspector general. Give me a break. For the most part, if it's not a constitutionally elected office, there's always going to be an opportunity for people to pick apart the neutrality of that figure if it's selected by elected officials. There's always going to be that lane. So the closest thing we have right now is the attorney general, not an inspector general, but you've got subpoena power, you've got some level of oversight opportunity. Do you see that as the lane that you would continue to pursue the attorney general's office as really for anybody out there screaming about the need for an inspector general? Take a look at Cranston or North Main Street. There might be the closest thing that you could have to it in the attorney general's office. Do you agree with that?
There's a couple of questions in there. So, number one, I appreciate the work that Peter Nerona has done. I think he really has sort of transformed what I call the public advocacy side of the office and really made it much more front and center in the office. Uh, and he's doing exactly what lawyers should do, which is to you be a lawyer for your client, right? The attorney general represents the people of the state of Rhode Island. The attorney general is not there for the governor, doesn't represent the speaker, doesn't represent the Senate president or any of the other players. There are times when they're going to represent them in court as on a public agency level, but the client is and always should be the people of the state of Rhode Island. So, like any good lawyer, you work with who you need to work to advance your client's interests. And I think Peter has done that, and he's shown a new way that it can be done, and I absolutely intend to follow in those footsteps. When it comes to the inspector general question, I don't see any conflict between the two. I think that you can have an independent constitutional officer as the attorney general, and I think that through the appropriate kind of legislation, you can create an inspector general who is within these departments that has enough independence and is shielded. Basically, they're going to need heat shields, frankly, from the political process to do legitimate investigations and to root out and say, hey, where is all this money going? Why is it that EOHHS, wakes up one day and there's 30 million that's not in the right pot? That's crazy to me. Why is it that a bridge on a United States of America interstate highway almost falls down and no one knows about it? That is crazy. We should bring every tool that we have to these concerns of about these public affairs. I think the AG and the Inspector General can operate on independent, but independent paths working towards the same goal.
We'll see how this plays out. There's a lot of different ideas for there. It does seem like the current plan from now Speaker Blazewski is probably going to have the most momentum as things shape out, but we'll see. You mentioned the Washington Bridge. Look, that speaks to a larger concern, which is faith and trust in government.
Yes.
Trued out in a moment, and people have a right to say, "Whoa, what's going on here?" So, as Attorney General, you have oversight of a lot of different, or you have jurisdiction over a lot of different aspects of infrastructure, or essentially pushing back on that which feeds the notion that Rhode Island is somehow corrupt or it's fallen apart. Good example would be the 610 project that Attorney General Nerona was deeply engaged in. How do you answer as a constitutional officer to that notion that the state is inherently corrupt? It's inherently insider deals. It's all who you know politicking. How do you, one, answer to people and legitimately say, yeah, we're going to try to solve that problem without trying to create problems? And two, how do you level set to say, well, this is just a problem with our politics on a national basis. It's not just a Rhode Island thing.
There's a lot of questions in that question. Let me take them. Let me take them in order. So, number one, I ran when I first ran. I explicitly ran on I'm not going to be. We're going to get rid of this "I know a guy" culture, or I'm going to work against the "I know a guy" culture in Rhode Island, which is present at the state house. But if you'll notice, if you've been a close observer over the last 10 years, particularly in the House, where transparency has really gone up, that element is while I'm not here to say it's gone, it's certainly come down a bit, and we have to fight against it every single day. I mean, remember, I, along with another other group of Democrats, voted against a sitting speaker, a Democratic speaker, because we weren't going to play those kinds of politics. Um, so electing good people is a start, and this brings me to a core issue when it comes to the Attorney General's office, for sure. There's going to be a time in the next attorney general's tenure, it doesn't matter who it is, where there's going to be decision that has to be made where the rule of law and justice point in one direction, and politics and public opinion and maybe what other players in politics, such as the governor or the speaker or the Senate president, whoever, want might go in the other direction. You need to have someone who has developed that political muscle of really sort of walking the walk, of being a straight talker and making the right decisions, to not be afraid to make the right decision, even though the politics says do something else. We don't have enough of that in Rhode Island. We need more of that in Rhode Island. That's the kind of politician I am, and that's the kind of attorney general I'll be.
Last question, and this is something you'll be the first here, so attention every other candidate that's going to appear on this show right now. You can't take this answer or you better build on it. But this is something that I want to ask everybody who's running for a major office. What's one thing that Rhode Island has as a strength that nobody else has that makes us truly unique?
Wow. Uh, you're you're singing my song because when I talk to folks about what Rhode Island has to offer, I always talk about the things that you can't put on Amazon, the things that you can't ship out to China. It's our environment. It is our beautiful beaches and coasts. We are a tremendous place to live. There's a lot of work that we need to do to make it better. I mean, we have a healthcare system that is teetering and really needs to come along in terms of protecting the providers, protecting the patients, making sure that the system is stable. And by the way, the AG has an important voice in that process as the regulator in that space. Our education system really needs some help. I know there's a governor's race going on. It's hotly contested. There's going to be a lot of ideas about education, but we need to get a handle on that problem because what we have that makes us special, we need to protect. And it is the things that you can't send out to the internet somewhere. The attorney general can be a big part of that conversation because as a lawyer, you're always supposed to be doing this one thing for your clients. Well, you do many things, but one of the things you do is you sort of try to get above it all and look out and see what dangers are coming down the road and raise the red flags. I think you'll see that with Peter Nerona's tenure. You'll certainly see that with mine. And that's what I think Rhode Island really has to offer that, we can preserve and make better.
And Representative, you mentioned something there with oversight of our hospital system and really our healthcare system on the whole. That's a major tenet of the attorney general's race. Not something that I left out here without thinking of it. It's something that I believe we need to dig into. So, coming up later on this election season, we'll be inviting all four attorney general candidates for a forum on oversight and really just everything that comes to our public health infrastructure right now, because that really is one of the governing principles. I think that people should be paying attention to when it comes to this attorney general's race. Representative Knight, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say this. I'm really glad that people have a choice in this election. There hasn't been a competitive AG's race in nearly 15 years. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be a candidate. Thank you for having me on, and I'd be happy to come again.
Follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.